Chapter 3, Discovering My Sister's Secret. It wasn't until dinner that Siddle was dragged out of her room by Ray. "Your sister and father are waiting for you downstairs," she patted Siddle's head. "Why aren't you playing with your sister? We thought you two were playing together upstairs." "Nothing." Siddle pulled her mother downstairs, her attitude evasive. When she sat down at the dining table, she suddenly remembered something. "Where's the doll I left on the sofa?" "Your father brought it into your room?" Ray asked. "Didn't you not like it?" Siddle, "Yes." "Didn't you say you wanted to put it in the storage room?" The chubby, immature face of the 7-year-old girl looked angry, both adorable and funny. In short, it had no power at all. Ray was amused by her daughter's cuteness. She pinched Siddle's angry round face, and said with a smile, "But I left the key to the basement storage room in the warehouse behind the garage. It's too late now, and it's not convenient to go get it." She pointed out that it was already dark outside. "Moreover, I agreed with Miss Joyce to treat that doll well." Ray thought for a moment and decided to patiently talk to Siddle. "Although she won't know, I don't think it's kind to leave 7-year-old Annabelle in a dusty basement. Siddle wouldn't have the heart to bring a girl your age down to the basement, right?" Siddle was extremely angry. Ray even laughed. Did she think what she said was funny? Why could they be so indifferent to the fact that there was a soul in such a toy? Or maybe adults don't believe in these things. But it's better to believe than not. What if it was real? She was even made to stand on end by this joke, to the point of guessing the terrifying future that would happen, the humanoid doll playing hide and seek with her in the villa. The one who gets caught will be turned into the next doll. The doll dragged along the bloody dress, a strange smile on its face, its stiff limbs dragging on the ceramic tile floor, making creaking sounds. Crack, crack, crack dash, its head turned, its pupils emitting a bright red light, looking straight at her who was hiding in the wardrobe. Siddle! Exclamation point. She absolutely could not let this scene become reality. Siddle came back to her senses, looked at Ray with indignation, turned around and walked to the dining table. Ray did not respect her at all. Indeed, to adults, children's words were just childish words, not to be trusted, but Siddle only felt tired. On the rectangular dining table, there were many rich foods. Esther turned back to her gentle, quiet expression, the corners of her lips slightly raised, her back straight, almost perfect elegance. She looked very much like the other people's child that parents often mentioned. Obviously Kelson and Ray were very pleased with Esther. Kelson smiled gently and talked to Esther. She looked like an elegant lady, her hands on her thighs, slightly tilted her head to talk to Kelson. Ray followed closely behind Siddle. Kelson noticed that Siddle's mood didn't seem good, turned her questioning gaze towards his wife. Ray reluctantly shook her head. Siddle, seeing that she was about to sit down and start eating, Kelson called out to her, "Your sister has been waiting for you for a long time. Why didn't you say hello before eating?" Siddle, "Hello, sister." She was sure that Esther didn't like her, so she smiled brightly at her. Esther smiled leisurely, her eyes filled with affection as she tilted her head to look at Kelson. "It's okay, I don't mind." Siddle witnessed the father-daughter relationship before her eyes. The more something was lacking, the more she wanted to show it off. Now she believed Esther was really an orphan, and hurriedly showed off their father-daughter relationship in front of her. She probably had never experienced this feeling before. Siddle coldly cut the beef on the plate into two, skewered a piece and stuffed it into her mouth. Esther was also cutting the beef, but unlike Siddle, her elegant posture cut the meat into many small pieces, and chewed each piece carefully. Compared to Siddle, she looked much more skillful. Halfway through the meal, Ray suddenly remembered something and stood up. "The milk is warmed up, I'll go get it for everyone." Siddle raised her head. "Thank you, Mom." She had just thought it through and was no longer angry. After all, to Ray, she didn't believe in ghosts and gods. To her, Annabelle was just an ordinary doll. Hearing Siddle's words of thanks, Esther's fingers that were cutting the beef stopped, and the sharp knife left a faint mark on the plate. But the little girl didn't say anything to Ray, and continued to cut her food without paying attention to anyone. Only when Ray handed her a cup of warm milk did Esther raise her head, her eyes showing an awkward expression. "I don't like milk." "Is that so?" Ray paused, a little embarrassedly holding back the cup of milk. "Mom doesn't know." "Sorry, Esther, I'll pay attention in the future." "Is there anything else you don't like to eat?" Esther didn't say anything, just shook her head. The atmosphere was a bit awkward for a moment, until Kelson interrupted. "If you don't like it, you don't have to drink it, Esther, tell your parents what you like." Only then did Esther smile, turn her head and sweetly thank Kelson. "Thank you, Dad." Siddle was drinking milk in large gulps. "It's hard, her fist is hard." The smell was strong. Siddle unconsciously thought of two words, green tea. Siddle suddenly realized that Esther not only hated her, but also her mother Ray. What is this called? A resentful woman? But her parents had almost used all their strength to have a perfect dinner, and neither of them felt that Esther had any problems. Siddle was upset and used a napkin to wipe her mouth, then jumped down from the chair. "I'm done eating, I'm going back to my room to sleep." She had to think of a way to deal with Annabelle. If Esther was really a green tea girl, living together for a long time would naturally expose her traces. Siddle wasn't worried about her right now. After all, she could see her true nature at a glance. Esther's green tea tricks weren't too clever. After returning to her room, Siddle thought for a while, opened the website, and searched for the keyword Annabelle. After a while, Siddle turned off the computer in disappointment. She couldn't find any information related to that doll. Siddle sat on the carpet sadly. She knew that with Ray's personality, at least tonight she definitely wouldn't listen to her and go get the key from the storage to bring Annabelle down to the basement. Besides, if there really was an evil spirit in that doll, then leaving it in the basement wouldn't have any effect. But no matter what, it couldn't just be left by the pillow. Siddle suddenly remembered, holding a distant hope, she opened a website to search for articles, entering the keyword Annabelle. Unexpectedly, she actually found a clue in an article. She stared at the news, her eyes widening. So that's how it was. After reading the article, Siddle only had one thought in her mind. Absolutely, can't let her parents live in the same room with that doll. So, I won't tell him about the pythons, the primeval rainforest, or the stars. That way, this person will be very happy, thinking that he has met someone who understands reason, who is intelligent. The bedside table was covered with cartoon characters. The small white table lamp did its job, emitting a warm orange light. Kelson held the book, The Little Prince, his voice low and leisurely read a bedtime story to the little girl lying on the bed. Her big round black eyes on her fair face, her curly brown hair hugging her face, the little girl quietly listened to Kelson read. "Okay, Esther." Kelson finally closed the book, kissed her temple lightly. "Today's story ends here. It's very late, you should go to sleep, my dear." "Daddy, do you have to go?" Esther opened her eyes wide. "That's right, your mother is waiting for you to come back to sleep." Kelson smiled and replied, "Good night, my dear. Sweet dreams." Esther's affection made Kelson feel very happy. Although Siddle was also a lovely girl, in some ways Siddle seemed too mature, sometimes even criticizing her father Kelson for being too childish. This made Kelson very sad, but today he found a sense of joy in raising his daughter. He turned off the desk lamp, closed the book, and heard a calm voice reply in the darkness. "Good night, Dad," the little girl said. In the darkness, he couldn't see his daughter's expression, but Kelson still left with satisfaction. He returned to the room. Ray had changed into her pajamas and was waiting for him on the bed. "I'm back, Esther is asleep," he said, and at the same time, he didn't forget to praise his daughter. "She's really obedient and quiet, even quieter than Siddle." "Really?" Ray looked at the beautiful doll wearing a dress on the wardrobe and replied, "That's just enough to make up for Siddle's personality, but..." "Honey, maybe we shouldn't talk about the kids now." Kelson kissed Ray on both cheeks. "Don't you think we should do something else now? For example?" Ray snorted. and joined her husband in joking, but just as Kelson was kissing Ray's lips, preparing to take the next step, there was a sudden knock on the door. Sigh. Kelson quickly smoothed her messy hair, reluctantly stood up. Ray also hurriedly fixed her pajamas. Standing in front of the main door was Esther. She was wearing a white nightgown, expressionlessly looking at the couple. Her fair face looked a bit pale under the light. "Dad, I'm scared." The little girl raised her head to look at Kelson, her lips moved, her expression unchanged as she said, "I don't want to sleep alone." Kelson awkwardly looked towards his wife. Ray on the bed blinked in surprise, then smiled gently and stood up. Then, "If you don't want to sleep alone, you can look for me." Ray's words were suddenly interrupted by Siddle. She looked at Esther with interest. "It just so happens that I don't want to sleep alone tonight either." "Ray, Siddle. Why did you come here?" Siddle despised her in his heart, thinking to himself that if he didn't come over, he wouldn't know what this bitch, the author wrote that, was up to. But on the surface she was still smiling, looking into the room, clumsily running to the closet, tiptoeing carefully holding Annabelle down, and answering truthfully, "I'm here to find my doll, Mom. I'll take Annabelle and her sister. Mom and Dad go to bed quickly." After she finished speaking, one hand grabbed Annabelle's skirt and dragged it on the ground, the other hand grabbed Esther's hand and turned her head without hesitation. Esther was pulled by her and staggered a bit, opened her mouth to say something. Siddle pretended not to see, grabbed her wrist and dragged her out. "All right," Kelson coughed twice from behind, "you sisters try to cultivate some feelings." Siddle came and went like the wind, storming over, but didn't linger on for long. The couple were still startled. There was no one in the room. Esther was dragged away by Siddle. Sneeze. The door behind had already closed. Slapdash, Siddle's hand was forcefully pulled away by Esther. She seemed to finally realize what had just happened. Siddle pulled the doll with one hand, looking bewildered as she turned her head to look at Esther, reaching out to pull the corner of her clothes. "Sister, let's sleep together, aren't you scared?" "I can sleep with you." Esther's eyebrows furrowed, her eyes were no longer timid, but coldly staring at Siddle. Even the air around her exuded her resentment. But Siddle was just a 7-year-old child. She was still a child didn't understand anything. She continued to smile and hold Esther's hand. "Sister, are you afraid of the dark?" "It's okay, I'll take you home." At this time, Esther didn't move away from her hand. Siddle led Esther back to the room. After entering the room was pitch black, the lights were not on. This was the first time Siddle had entered her room since Esther arrived. Siddle was very familiar with the layout of this room. Thinking for a moment, she pulled Esther and instructed, "Sister, go to bed first, I'll put away the doll and come back to sleep with you." Unexpectedly, Esther actually let go of her hand, groping in the dark and slowly walking to sit on the bed. But the little girl didn't say anything. Could it be that this little green tea girl was really scared by her? Siddle was a little frustrated, but she didn't think much of it. After finding out Annabelle's origin, she just wanted to take the doll from her parents' room first, and then conveniently sleep with her parents. She didn't expect to meet Esther. The doll in Siddle's arms was very heavy. She carefully hugged the little girl doll, returned to her room, put the doll on the swing, then took small steps out the door, carefully closing the door. Not knowing if the doll was too heavy, or if it was for some other reason, before closing the door, Siddle heard the creaking sound of the swing swaying. She returned to the hallway, not even remembering to bring her own blankets and pillows before leaving. Strangely, after Siddle opened Esther's room door, she didn't see anyone on the bed. "Sister?" Siddle called out strangely, her voice echoing in the dark and deserted room. No one answered. Following the dim light outside the window, Siddle groped for the light switch next to the door frame. She fumbled for a while before finding the switch. Click, it wasn't the light in the room that turned on, but a faintly flickering purple light. At the same time, the pictures plastered all over the wall lit up. Siddle was startled and stood there, her pupils unconsciously constricting, instinctively taking a step back, suddenly hearing footsteps behind her. "What are you doing?" She heard someone mumble. Siddle turned around in panic, seeing Esther standing behind her at some point, her face expressionless, her head tilted, one hand clasped behind her. The brown-haired girl's snow-white face was hidden in the darkness, only her crystal-black pupils shone in the purple light. At this moment, those two transparent crystals were staring at her.